Hey guys, it's Kylie, and in today's video I'm going to go through the rules of wrestling. So today I'm going to share the rules of wrestling, and this is specifically college and high school wrestling here in the United States. I'm going to go through the basic rules of how that is scored and how the sport is played. There are other forms of wrestling, but I'm going to focus today on college and high school wrestling. But if you guys are interested in more sports administration videos just like this, definitely hit the subscribe button, turn on the bell so you get notified every time I upload, as I post a new video every single Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So to start off, wrestling is played one-on-one. It is played with two wrestlers on the mat at a time. In college, the max diameter of the mat is 42 feet, and in high school, that max diameter is 28 feet. It is a circular mat, and there are also two start lines on the mat, and they are 3 feet apart. Now, the goal of the two wrestlers is to either pin their opponent or score more points than their opponent. Now, to pin your opponent, you have to get them having their two shoulder blades touching the mat for at least 1 second. Once that is done, you win the match. So it's as easy as that. If you can get your opponent to have both of their shoulder blades touching the mat for 1 second, you win automatically. However, your opponent is trying to stop you from doing that, so they are fighting back, trying to stop you from being able to do that. Now, if you are able to pin your opponent down, this is winning by default or winning by a pin. Now, if you aren't able to do this, there are other ways to win, and that is by points. So wrestling is scored by points. So if nobody's able to pin their opponent, at the end of the match, whoever has the most points wins. Now, I am going to go through the point system in a moment, but we're going to start off with a few different positions. This will help you better understand the point system. So a neutral position is when both wrestlers are standing on their feet and they're standing across from each other. An offensive position is when one wrestler is actually on top of the other. They usually have one arm around their waist and the other arm on the opponent's forearm, and they are usually on top. Not always, but usually on top. And then a defensive position, you have your hands and knees on the ground, and you are usually on the bottom. Now, combining the offensive and defensive positions, that is called the referee position. And in wrestling, there are 5 main ways of scoring. The first is a takedown, and this scores 2 points. And this is when you take your opponent and you throw them down to the ground. You have clear control over them, and you are putting them onto the floor. The next one is an escape, and this is when you, as a defensive player, are able to get out of the hold of the offense player and get back into that neutral position. And this awards you 1 point. The next one is a reversal, and this is 2 points. And this is when you, as the defensive player, get from being that defensive player to being the offensive player on top of your opponent. So you go from being underneath your opponent, being the one on the ground, to being able to have control of your opponent and be the one on top. Another way to score is with a near fall. And this is when you, as an offensive player, have control over that defensive player, and you have them pinned almost all the way to the ground. So you don't have their shoulder blades touching the ground because you would win by a pin, but you have them almost there. Their back is at a 45-degree angle or less. They're either on their head, they're on their shoulders. They're not on their shoulder blades, but they are very close to being pinned. If you are able to hold this for 2 to 4 seconds, you get 2 points. If you are able to hold it for longer, up to 5 seconds, you get 3 points. So the longer you are able to hold that person down, the more points you do get. And the referee will be counting this down by usually slapping their hand to the mat to show you the amount of time that's elapsed. And finally, the 5th way to score points is with penalty points. And this is when your opponent commits something that is illegal. The most common form of penalty points in high school and college is stalling. And this is when one wrestler prevents their opponent from scoring points by either avoiding their opponent, trying to step out of bounds so that their opponent can't get the points that they need. It's working against your opponent. If this is seen, then you get a penalty and your opponent is awarded 1 point. The wrestling match is played in 3 periods of 2 minutes each, and the highest score at the end of that time does win. If there is a tie, it does go on to another period. If somebody is winning by 15 points, they do automatically win. They win by a technical fall. If you win at the end of time between 1 and 7 points ahead of your opponent, that means you win by decision. And if you win with 8 or 14 more points than your opponent, then you actually win by major decision. Another way you can get a point is riding time. So if you are the one on top of your opponent and controlling them, a clock is counting how long you are on top of your opponent. And at the end of the match, at the end of the 3 periods, if you are on top of your opponent for more than a minute than they are on top of you, so both players have their time being counted, and if your time is over a minute more than your opponent's, you do get an extra point. So this can help you win. If you have control, you can get that extra point you need to win. You could also win by default, by disqualification, or if there's an injury. So if there's an injury, your opponent might have to leave, then you win by default. You might also win by forfeit if your opponent doesn't show up. Or if your opponent gets disqualified, you can also win that way, and that's usually there's some sort of major foul that your opponent committed that the referee decides that they are not fit to continue playing. And then one other nuance for this is your start position. So at the beginning of the first period, you do both start in that neutral position. However, at the beginning of the second period, one player is given the option of being in an offensive position or a defensive position, or they can choose to default their turn to the third period. And then the other player in that third period does get the option to be in that offensive or defense position. If the player from the second period does decide to deflect their decision to the third, that player does get their decision in the second period. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you have any questions about wrestling, the rules, the scoring, any of that, definitely let me know in the comments down below. If there's any other videos related to wrestling that you would like to see, also let me know that as well. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video, and I will see you guys next Wednesday.